The high school reunion door was propped open. Then she whispered, "You still owe me that promise." The back door of the gym groaned open before the reunion music faded, and Elena Parker stepped outside, clutching a budget folder like it could keep 24 programs alive. A brick held the door open behind her. That was the first wrong detail. I had been standing near the chain-link fence for almost an hour, pretending the beige cinderblock wall mattered more than the people inside. I had not picked up a name tag. The base thumped through the wall, dry leaves scraped the concrete, the hinge gave another tired squeal, and Elena tightened both hands around the folder against her chest. She did not see me at first. She stopped on the concrete pad and looked down at the papers in her arms. Her cream-buttoned blouse was tucked neatly under a light cardigan, professional enough for a bored hallway and rumpled enough to show she'd been fighting numbers all week. Her long brown hair had escaped whatever clip had tried to hold it back. One loose strand kept falling across her cheek, and she tucked it away with the back of her wrist without lowering the folder. Then the music inside changed to a song from our senior year. Her face moved before she could control it. That was the second wrong detail. Elena Parker had always controlled the room first and reacted later. At 17, she could make a chemistry lab full of boys stop laughing with one raised eyebrow. At 31, according to the district website, I had looked up 3 times before deciding not to come tonight. She was the district curriculum director, high status locally, polished, capable, the kind of person who made systems behave because children paid the price when adults did not. But the woman standing by the back door was not preparing for a reunion speech. She looked like she was counting the cost of a disaster no one else could see. I stepped away from the fence. Gravel cracked under my sneakers. Her head snapped up. For half a second, the official mask appeared, chin level, eyes sharp, folder held like a shield. Then she recognized me. "Ethan," she said. My name in her voice landed with 10 years of silence attached to it. "You're hiding," I said, because it was safer than saying I had spent the whole evening trying to decide whether I had earned the right to say hello. She let out a short laugh that did not reach her eyes. "I'm pacing myself. The alumni committee expects a speech in 20 minutes. I needed air that didn't smell like cheap punch and desperation." I put my hands in the pockets of my gray hoodie. At 29. I was 2 years younger than her, but standing behind that gym put me right back at 17. Sitting beside her in AP chemistry because she was the only person patient enough to decode my handwriting. I'd left town the day after graduation. I'd promised I would come back. I'd promised we would stay in touch. I'd promised the age difference would not matter once I was out in the world. Then, I had done the least dramatic and most cowardly thing possible. I faded. Shorter messages, longer pauses, excuses wrapped in ambition, and a silence I let harden until it became easier to maintain than to break. The folder in her hands shifted. The top page slid sideways enough for me to read the header. Preliminary Phase 1 Program Reductions. 24 lines, 24 proposed cuts. The brick at the door suddenly made sense. She had not stepped outside for air. She had stepped outside because whatever was in that folder had cornered her. "You don't look like someone prepping a speech," I said. "You look like someone trying to stop a train with a spreadsheet." A corner of her mouth moved. You always did know how to make panic sound inefficient. Panic usually is. She glanced back at the gym door. The hinge complained again, metal grinding against metal. "It's the new district superintendent, Vance. He brought in automated efficiency software to evaluate every program by historical metrics. He says the model can optimize the budget without bias." And? I already knew the answer. I had built models like that. I had seen what happened when a system trained on neglect was sold as objectivity. "It's flagging remedial reading, language support, and special education grants for termination," she said. "Every vulnerable program that ever looked expensive on paper. Vance is presenting the final cuts to the board in 6 weeks. If I don't endorse the first phase by Monday, he'll submit it without my signature and tell the board I refuse to cooperate." The folder bent slightly under her grip. "There are 300 kids tied to those lines," she added. Not numbers. Kids, reading specialists, transportation support, adaptive classroom aids, after-school intervention. He calls it redundancy because the dashboard says the return is too low. Inside the gym, people cheered at some memory projected onto a screen. Outside, the chain-link fence rattled in the wind. In my line of work, we had a rule I used to write at the top of every model review before corporate managers told me it sounded too human for technical documentation. Bad data predicts the past, it can't write the future. If a district had historically underfunded the kids who needed the most support, a naive model would learn underfunding as the baseline. Then it would recommend more underfunding and call the harm efficient. Data isn't objective, I said. It's a mirror. Sometimes it shows you the person who built the parameters. Sometimes it shows you the people they forgot to count. Before Elena could answer, the door hinge groaned again. A man in a sharp navy suit stepped out and held the door with 2 fingers, as if the old metal might stain him. I knew the type before he spoke, polished, certain, impatient with any reality that did not fit into a presentation deck. "Elena," he said, checking his watch. "The committee is waiting, and I need your signature on the preliminary Phase 1 reductions before the weekend." Her shoulders squared. "I told you, Mr. Vance, I haven't finished reviewing the methodology." "The methodology is a machine learning model," he said. "It doesn't have an agenda. It does the math you refuse to do." He smiled at me, then dismissed me in the same glance. Gray hoodie, jeans, no name tag, no visible title. Useless. "Monday," he said to Elena, "or I submit it without your endorsement." He turned back toward the door. "Actually," I said. The word cut cleanly through the late afternoon air. Vance paused. I did not step closer. I did not raise my voice. I just delivered the math. If your model uses raw graduation rates and annual program cost as primary weights without adjusting for socioeconomic baseline, disability designation, English language access, and historical funding levels by zip code, it is not doing neutral optimization. It is replicating structural underinvestment. If you submit a budget based on that output, the state compliance office can freeze the operational fund before Thanksgiving. Vance turned fully now. "Excuse me?" "I'm the person your software vendor hopes is too expensive for the district to hire," I said. His eyes narrowed. "And who are you?" "Someone who builds those models for a living." The hinge creaked behind him. For 1 second, he looked less like a superintendent and more like a man who had heard a lock click somewhere he had not expected a door. "Monday, Elena!" he snapped. Then he pushed back inside. The door slammed. The echo rattled the cinder blocks. The bricks skidded an inch, but held the door ajar. Elena stared at the closing gap until the gym lights narrowed into a bright line across the concrete. "Was that true?" she asked. "Probably." She looked at me. "I need the data set to prove it." The wind lifted the corner of her folder. She pinned it down with her thumb. A small ink mark had smudged across her knuckle, the kind of detail that made the crisis feel less like policy and more like a person who had been making notes past midnight. She did not mention the decade of silence. She did not ask why I had never written back after her last message. She only looked at the papers, then at me, with the practical clarity of someone who recognized a tool at the exact moment the bridge was cracking. "Look at it with me," she said. I nodded once. Okay. It was that simple. Not forgiveness, not a reunion, a job. And for the first time in years, a job felt like it could matter. The next morning, the district administration building looked different without students, parents, and ringing phones. Saturday emptied the halls of their official noise and left the old fluorescent lights buzzing over polished floors. Trophy cases lined the corridor. Faded photos of debate teams, basketball champions, choir competitions, and science fairs stared out from behind glass. Elena unlocked her office with a district key attached to a plain blue lanyard. Her office was an organized disaster. File folders stacked by urgency, color-coded binders along the wall, student art framed over the printer, a kettle on a side table, 3 mugs, only 1 clean. Peppermint tea bags in a jar labeled with masking tape. "This is not as chaotic as it looks," she said. I was not going to say anything. You absolutely were. I was going to think it silently. That earned half a smile. Small, tired, real. I set my laptop at the far edge of her desk, leaving the center clear for her folders. Before I touch the export, I need this clean. Did you pull the district data with your administrative access? Yes. She opened a drawer and took out a flash drive inside a labeled evidence sleeve. Vance locked down admin privileges yesterday afternoon after sending the email. But I exported the raw input logs before he did. I also wrote down the time, the server path, and the access reason. Good. She raised an eyebrow. That sounded like praise. It was documentation appreciation. Romantic. Extremely. The humor landed softly, like a folded napkin placed beside a spilled cup. Not enough to fix the crisis, but enough to keep the room from swallowing us. I opened a blank chain of custody form on my screen. Do you want me to review this as an informal technical consultant, or do you want a full audit package that can go in front of the board? She looked at the flash drive, then slid it across the desk. Full package. If Vance tries to use the storm of numbers to drown me out, I want the numbers standing where everyone can see them. That means I ask annoying questions. I direct curriculum for 8 schools. Annoying questions are my native language. I log the drive serial number, the time, her authorization statement, and the file hash before opening anything. Elena watched each step, arms folded, not from suspicion but from habit. She had been alone too long with people who claimed authority and skipped accountability. I did not blame her. I need to build a shadow environment, I said, copying the dataset into a clean local folder. The model Vance is using has a dashboard, but the dashboard only shows outputs. We need to recreate the pipeline, inputs, feature weights, coefficients, thresholds. If the bias is there, it will leave fingerprints. How long will that take? A few days to clean the data? A few weeks to run the simulations? We have 6 weeks before the final cuts. Then we start now. She pulled a chair beside the desk, close enough to see the code, far enough that the laptop stayed the boundary. Show me what you're looking for. For the next 3 hours, we worked in disciplined silence. My keyboard clicked through imported CSV files. Her pen moved across a yellow legal pad, translating budget columns into actual programs. Remedial Reading Initiative, grades 2 through 5. District Adaptive Transportation Grant. Speech support hours. After-school literacy lab. On my screen, they were rows. In her handwriting, they became doors that would close on children who already had too many closed doors. I had spent most of my career optimizing things that did not deserve optimization: ad placement, subscription churn, engagement curves. This was different. At row 405, the cursor blinked beside a column labeled IEP_flag. The coefficient attached to it was negative. I stopped typing. Elena noticed immediately. What? I turned the screen toward her. Look at this column. She leaned forward. Her sleeve brushed the edge of the folder, and I kept my focus on the highlighted row. The algorithm assigns a negative coefficient to any student file that includes an individualized education program. I said, it treats a legal requirement for support as a financial liability. Then it grades the entire school's efficiency down, because the school is serving students who have documented needs. Elena's pen stopped moving. That violates the federal grant terms, she said. Yes? And if Vance cuts funding based on this, the district gets sued, the students lose services, and the board spends the next year claiming they trusted the vendor. She stared at the row. The fluorescent light buzzed above us. The peppermint tea bag in her mug had oversteeped and darkened the water until it looked almost black. Can you prove it is systemic? She asked. I need 10,000 iterations. Can you run that many? I looked at the folder. The row, the quiet office, built around a woman trying to keep 300 kids from becoming rounding errors. Yes. Her shoulders lowered by half an inch. It was not relief yet. It was the first load-bearing beam under a ceiling that had started to crack. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my life around the district's dataset. I rented a room at the old hotel near the highway, Because the town had no short-term apartments available and because distance mattered, Elena and I needed clean boundaries as much as clean data. We worked in our office during the day. Then I returned to the hotel at night to run scripts on my personal research cluster, a cloud environment I paid for myself and had used for independent academic replication work. No company resources, no hidden access, no shortcuts Vance could exploit later. Elena authorized every district export in writing, logged every file transfer, and kept paper copies in a locked cabinet beside her desk. The lock looked like it came from a school supply catalog in 1998. The world's least intimidating vault, I said one afternoon. It has protected permission slips, flu shot forms, and one emergency chocolate bar for 9 years, she said. Show some respect. Then it has seen more public service than most software vendors. She laughed into her coffee, and the sound stayed with me after the next script failed. We developed a rhythm that felt both new and painfully familiar. We did not talk about us. We talked about data sets, variance, standard deviation, budget lines, legal compliance, and whether the dashboard's prediction intervals were intentionally hidden or simply designed by people allergic to clarity. I learned that she took her coffee black now. She learned that I tapped the spacebar 3 times before rerunning a failed query. When she found the hotel key I had lost beside the printer, she held it up like evidence. You built a shadow model with 8 feature adjustment layers, she said, and lost access to your own room. I object to the tone of the dataset. Objection noted and overruled. The humor never erased the pressure. It just gave us enough air to stay human under it. One Tuesday afternoon, rain flattened the light against the windows. We were the only 2 left in the administration building. The janitor had gone home. The hallway outside her office smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper. My personal research cluster was halfway through a bias sensitivity run that would take another 34 minutes. The fan on my laptop whirred loudly enough to sound offended by the assignment. Elena was reading a dense legal brief on state education compliance. She sighed and let the paper drop to the table. I feel like I'm trying to hold back the ocean with a teacup. I looked at the legal brief, then at the half-empty mug beside her elbow. Technically, that is a school district-approved ceramic intervention tool. She blinked. Then she laughed. A small laugh, but clean. It loosened something in the room. I forgot how annoying you are, she said. I prefer precise. You would... She picked up the brief again, but did not read it. Her thumb pressed against the staple until the paper bent. Why are you really doing this, Ethan? She asked. The laptop fan kept spinning between us. Rain tapped the window. On the screen, the progress bar inched from 61 to 62%. I could have said because the model was bad. I could have said because 300 kids needed someone who understood the math. I could have said because I owed her 10 years of showing up. That one stayed behind my teeth. I used to build systems and tell myself it did not matter what people did with them, I said. Then people did exactly what the systems told them to do. She looked at me across the table. I slid the legal brief closer to her instead of reaching across the space between us. This time, I want the model to answer for itself. She accepted the answer, not because it was complete, but because it was honest enough for the room we were in. The midpoint shift hit on a Thursday. I was at the hotel, compiling visualization graphs, when my phone buzzed. Elena's name lit the screen. He moved the timeline, she said. I closed the laptop halfway, grabbed my keys, and was already at the door before I asked, how far? Emergency vote tomorrow morning? Her voice was tight. She was speaking in full sentences, which told me she had forced herself into operational mode. Vance sent an email to the board an hour ago. He says the software flagged a critical budget shortfall and the cuts have to be ratified immediately. He's freezing the affected accounts at 9. I reached Elena's office 20 minutes later. She stood by the window with the blinds half open, staring out at the empty parking lot. The budget folders had been pushed aside. A printed board agenda sat on the desk, the emergency vote highlighted in yellow. He knows we are auditing his data, I said. He checked the server logs. She tapped the agenda. He is locking the decision before we can finish the counter evidence. Outside, wind shoved rain across the asphalt. On her desk, the old cabinet key lay beside the no folder. He promised them a 20% cost reduction, she said. They want to believe him because believing him makes the budget easy. If those cuts pass tomorrow, reading specialists lose contracts Monday, adaptive aids get reassigned, and the kids who need consistency get another adult disappearing from their week. She pressed both palms flat on the desk. I thought if I worked hard enough, played by the rules, documented every harm, someone would listen. I stepped closer, stopping with the desk still between us. The distance mattered. She had Vance pushing from one side and a broken system from the other. The last thing she needed was someone else deciding what rescue should look like. I can accelerate the simulations. I said, I have a personal research cluster. It is expensive by the hour, but it is mine to use. No company servers, no unauthorized access. The audit stays clean. Her eyes lifted. If I run it tonight, we can have confidence intervals, bias maps, and projected legal exposure by morning. I continued, but it becomes evidence you present, not a speech I deliver over you. She took in the line I had drawn. What do you need from me? Written authorization for the additional processing, a signed statement confirming the data export path, and your policy translation. I can prove the model is biased. You have to show them who pays for that bias. For the first time since I walked in, her hand stopped moving. Stay, she said. If Vance tries to use the dashboard to erase the kids, I want the numbers and the names in front of me. Then we build both. We worked straight through the night. At 9, she wrote the authorization memo. At 10, I started the expanded simulation. At 11, the first run failed because the vendor had normalized program cost without separating legally mandated services from optional enrichment. At midnight, Elena found the policy appendix that proved why the distinction mattered. At 2, she brewed coffee so strong it looked like it had a grievance. This is not coffee, I said after one sip. It is district budget coffee. It has a disciplinary record. It has seen things. At 3 in the morning, the cluster kicked back a warning error. The API call had exceeded memory because the historical dataset contained duplicated student identifiers from a migration 6 years earlier. My fingers stopped over the keyboard. The old panic came sharp and quiet, not dramatic, worse, efficient. 10 years ago, when things became complicated, I had left. Not all at once, not in a way anyone could confront. I simply started answering later. I made distance look like schedule pressure. I made silence look like ambition. Now the progress window glowed red against my hands. Elena had fallen asleep upright on the couch, a highlighter still resting across her notebook. The blanket she kept for late nights had slid to the floor. I stood, picked up the blanket, and paused before moving closer. Stay useful, I told myself under my breath. I placed the blanket over the back of the couch where she could reach it if she woke, then returned to the laptop. No gesture that could be misread, no comfort that asked for acknowledgement, just the work. I isolated the duplicated IDs, wrote a deduplication rule, and reran the simulation. The loading bar held at 99% for a full minute. Rain tapped the office window. The fluorescent light hummed. The old cabinet key sat beside the no folder like a stubborn little witness. Then the screen turned green. The output dropped into the local drive. 10,000 iterations, a systemic bias map, a legal exposure estimate, a district-by-district harm projection, and one row that made the entire case simple enough for a school board to understand. Programs serving students with documented support needs had been marked inefficient because the algorithm treated need as waste. I printed the reports while Elena slept another 14 minutes. When the first binder came out warm from the printer, she opened her eyes. Did it fail? She asked. No. She sat up slowly, rubbing one hand over her face. I set the binder on the table in front of her. It told on itself. The emergency board meeting was held in the old gym. The administration building's conference room was under renovation, so they set up folding tables on the polished hardwood floor beneath the same banners that had hung over the reunion. By morning, the gold lights were gone. A projector, 5 microphones, and Vance's sleek dashboard had replaced the DJ equipment. The back door stood closed, but I kept hearing its rusted hinge anyway. Vance stood at the front in his navy suit, laser pointer in hand. His slides were beautiful in the way dangerous things often are when designed by people who mistake polish for truth. "As you can see," he said, "the algorithm has identified 24 redundant programs. By terminating these allocations, we ensure the financial health of the district for the next 5 years. It is objective, clean, and necessary." 5 board members looked down at their agenda packets. The board president tapped her pen once against the table. "Ms. Parker, you requested 2 minutes before the vote." Vance's jaw moved. Elena stood at the back of the gym beside me, holding the binder against her ribs. The emergency board packet I had printed was under my arm. She looked at me once, not asking permission. "Check in the line." "You speak first," I said. "I will explain the model when you call me." She nodded. Then she walked down the center aisle. Her heels clicked against the wood. Every head turned. She did not hurry. She did not clutch the binder like a shield this time. She carried it like evidence. "Mr. Vance," Elena said, her voice carrying without a microphone. "Before the board votes on an algorithm's recommendation, they should know that the algorithm is fundamentally broken." Vance sighed. "Ms. Parker, we've been over this. You cannot argue with math because you dislike the result." "I am not arguing with math," Elena said. "I am arguing with the assumption that a dashboard can replace responsibility." She placed her binder on the first folding table and opened it to the executive summary. The software marks remedial reading, language support, and special education services as inefficient because those programs cost more per student. It does not adjust for legal mandates, baseline funding gaps, or documented support needs. In plain language, it punishes schools for serving the children the law requires us to serve. The gym fell quiet. Then she turned and looked toward the back. Ethan Morgan conducted a secondary technical review under my written authorization. "I'm asking the board to hear the findings before any vote." That was the consent line in action. Not dramatic, not romantic, better, public. I walked forward and set a bound report in front of each board member. I did not stand in Elena's place. I stood beside the projector, where the numbers belonged. "My name is Ethan Morgan," I said. "I am a senior data scientist. Over the last 3 weeks, I ran the district's raw input logs through a clean local environment and a neutral regression model." I advanced the slide to the coefficient table. "Your current software does not measure educational efficiency. It measures historical compliance with past underfunding. The strongest example is RAW 405 of the source data. Any file that includes an individualized education program receives a negative coefficient before student outcome is even considered. The model treats a legal support plan as a financial drag." The board president bent over the report. "Mr. Vance assured us the software was neutral." "A model is only as neutral as its training data and feature design," I said. "If you vote to execute these cuts, you are not voting on neutral data. You are voting on a provably biased metric. The state compliance office will classify it as targeted discrimination risk, and the district will spend more defending the decision than it claims to save." The projector hummed. Vance's face flushed. "This is an unauthorized audit. He had no right to access district data." "The data belongs to the district," Elena said before I could answer. "And as curriculum director, I authorized the review in writing to ensure federal compliance." She placed the authorization memo on the table. Then she looked directly at the board president. "Throw the software out. We build the budget the hard way, by looking at the kids, not a dashboard." The words hit the room harder than any chart I had made. The board president closed the binder. She removed her glasses, cleaned them with a cloth, and put them back on. "Mr. Vance," she said, "we are tabling the vote indefinitely. We will be requesting a vendor review, a compliance audit, and a revised budget process led by curriculum staff." Vance's laser pointer clicked uselessly in his hand. He looked at me once, then at Elena. and for the first time since the back door opened at the reunion, he looked smaller than the system he had tried to hide behind. "This is a mistake," he said. Elena did not move. "No," she said. "The mistake was letting a model tell us which children mattered less." The board president nodded once. The vote was suspended. The cuts were frozen. The meeting adjourned in a surge of whispers and paper shuffling. Legal counsel asked for the evidence packet. The union representative shook Elena's hand. Someone from special education cried near the bleachers and pretended to look for a pen. I packed the laptop slowly, letting Elena have the room she had earned. When the crowd finally thinned, we walked out the back doors of the gym. The same concrete pad waited outside. The brick was gone. The heavy metal door groaned shut behind us and latched with a solid click. Elena leaned one shoulder against the cinder block wall and closed her eyes for a single breath. Not collapse, release. "You did it," she said. "We did it. I corrected. I ran the numbers. You made them look at the children behind them." Her eyes opened. Morning light had replaced the reunion's golden glow. The school parking lot was half empty. A bus hissed near the curb. Somewhere beyond the gym, students were arriving for a normal day because adults had stopped one bad system from making their week smaller. I lifted my laptop bag onto my shoulder. The job was done. The audit package existed. Vance could no longer use the dashboard as gospel. The old instinct rose anyway. Leave before the room asks for something you might fail to give. I took one step toward the parking lot. "Elena, She reached out and caught the strap of my bag. Her grip was firm, not desperate. "My old lab partner found me behind the gym," she said, looking straight at me, and then whispered. She paused. I went still. I knew the line before she finished it. I had said it to her the day I left for college, standing on this exact concrete pad with a duffel bag at my feet and all the confidence of a boy who thought promises became easier if you postponed them. "You still owe me that promise," she said. The rusted hinge clicked once behind us in the wind. "I promised I'd come back," I said. "You did." Her hand stayed on the bag strap, leaving the choice visible between us. But the promise was not just to come back when it was useful. The promise was to stay when it got ordinary. Ordinary. The word did more damage than any accusation could have. Grand gestures were easy for men like me. A crisis gave you a role, a timeline, a measurable output. Ordinary was where I had failed her. Messages answered late, calls missed, visits postponed. The quiet days where nothing exploded and love required maintenance instead of heroics. I looked at the closed gym door. Bad data predicts the past, it cannot write the future. The past had a clean data set on me. Runaway patterns, avoidance under emotional load, high probability of retreat after completion. But models fail when new variables enter the system. I took the strap from her hand, set the laptop bag down on the concrete, and turned back fully. "I don't want to run your spreadsheets anymore, Elena," I said. Her mouth curved, but her eyes stayed serious. "Good," she said, "because I need someone to help me build better ones." Then she handed me the evidence binder. Not her hand. Not a kiss. The binder? A next step. "We have a revised budget committee meeting in 2 weeks, she said. "If you are staying, start there." I took the binder. I'm staying. 4 months later, winter sharpened the air around Elena's porch. I carried a stack of cardboard boxes up the steps and set them down by the front door, breathing out a cloud of white fog. The district was stable. Vance had resigned in November after the vendor review exposed more weighting errors in a procurement conflict. The reading specialists kept their contracts. The adaptive aides were back with the students who needed them. The revised budget took 6 meetings, 2 public forums, and 1 spreadsheet, Elena said, looked like it had been formatted by a raccoon with a statistics degree. I accepted the criticism because she was correct. I had negotiated a permanent remote work arrangement with Vanguard and rented a small house 3 blocks from the school. The personal research cluster had finally been paid off, which Elena celebrated by taping a hand-drawn certificate above my desk. "Congratulations, you made the cloud less dramatic." The front door opened. Elena stood in the doorway wearing a school district sweatshirt over dark leggings, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. No speech, no performance, just steam rising into the cold. "You know," she said, looking at the boxes, "efficiency is not the same as carrying too much at once. I have heard that rumor. You built a whole career around metrics and still refuse to optimize trips from the car. Some models are emotionally biased." She handed me a mug. The ceramic was warm against my cold fingers. For a second, the steam and the winter light blurred together, and I thought of the back door of the gym, the brick on the concrete, the hinge complaining every time the past opened an inch. Elena reached into the pocket of her sweatshirt and pulled out a brass key on a plain ring. She did not hold it out immediately. She placed it on top of the highest box, where I would have to choose to pick it up. "For the front door," she said, "since you are here most mornings anyway." The key rested against a cardboard box labeled Books Curriculum. "Do not let Ethan sort." I saw that label. I said, "I wrote it for a reason. The data may be incomplete." "The data includes your sock drawer." I considered that. "Fair sample size." She smiled, the small, tired smile she usually saved for solved problems and repaired systems. I picked up the key. The metal was cool and solid in my palm. "I'm not taking this because of the crisis," I said. "I know. I'm taking it because the ordinary part starts now." "I know that too." I slipped the key onto my ring. It clicked softly against the others. Across the neighborhood, beyond the bare trees and the roofs dusted with frost, the high school gym was barely visible. The rusted metal door was probably locked against the weather. No brick holding it open, no emergency meeting, no dashboard pretending to know which children mattered. Just a door that had once opened at the wrong time and given the future a chance to walk outside. Bad data had predicted the past. It had failed to write this. The end.